Welcome this week to Ben's Fireside Interviews. This week is really fun because we're bringing business and passion into one room. I've got Markus Kraetschmer with us today. Markus has a storied career in the football world, bringing business acumen and sporting knowledge together to make high return opportunities in what is largely a passion-driven environment. Before we go any further, just really want to ask everybody to subscribe and like on our YouTube channel and all our various other channels as well. Markus has served in many roles at Austria Wien, which is Austria's leading football club, culminating in becoming the managing director of the business, where the club has a huge achievements, becoming 3 times Austria champions, 5 times Austrian Cup winners, and achieving major honors in the UEFA Cup group stages. During his long stint at Austria Wien, Markus was also Vice President and Supervisory Board member of the Austrian Bundesliga, heading the committee including the TV contract and licensing, and he was also the Executive Committee member of the Austrian FA, the OFB. Since then, Markus has run his own consulting business, advising clients on a multi-sport basis, and is a popular lecturer and presenter. Markus, welcome. So much to talk about. So please give us a little bit of flavor of who you are and what you're bringing to the world of sport.
Okay, thank you for the invitation, Ben. Great to be on your show to talk a little bit about, as you mentioned before, business and passion and sports for sure. Today I'm 55 years old. I started my career in sports. After my studies of business administration, I started classic way in a bank, but the CEO of the bank at that time was also the vice president of the football club of Austria Vienna. And then one day he brought me to his office and said, "Mr. Kraetschmer, I have a special job for you. You have to go for a couple of months for the football club to look there." I was pretty young at that moment, starting my career. And I said, "Okay, I will do this." And out of this, it was were nearly 24 years in one of the most successful football clubs of Austria in this field of sports. But I played basketball up to the second league in Austria for myself, and I was very open-minded also to other sports. And therefore, I always, for sure, was focused on football. As you mentioned, as a financial guy, also being part Austrian Bundesliga, Austrian FA, also in the ECA. So from the beginning, very important for my today's role in business. The networking on the international base in the ECA was very important. I did some good cooperations with clubs from Germany, Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich, but also in Russia, for example. And I was very open for the international way, especially as a mid-sized club from a smaller league, not coming from the Premier League. And after 24 years, I stopped with Austria Vienna, new president, new board. So it was time to say goodbye. Let's do a new way. And it was also then often my approach to say, okay, I want to do my own business. And out of this, I started also for sure focused on sports. So for example, I started the franchise of the Vienna Vikings in American football in this new European League of Football, giving them the structure, bringing them the first investors, bringing them sponsors. I helped the Austrian Volleyball League to go out of the big association to have their own league format. I'm still in basketball. We have the Vienna Timberwolves with a very good youth department. We brought, for example, Pöltl to Toronto Raptors in NBA. So I'm really open-minded. And out of the sports network, I jumped into other businesses with partners. For example, for the Kenston Group, acting as a managing director. They come out from the German pension business, but also as an investor in Austria, in the UK, in Germany, but also in the UAE, which are based in Dubai. And I also have a small business as shares in a company, as I was in India 2 years ago, bringing nurses, doctors, but also other skilled workers to other companies. Very open-minded, but everything is based on my network in sports. Just for example, coming together with German pension business was because the owner said, "Mr. Kraetschmer, you have good relations with Borussia Dortmund. And in the partners of Borussia Dortmund, you have hundreds of companies that are interesting targets for this company." And so everything stuck together. And I guess very interesting. And especially in the last nearly 5 years, I'm more than really convinced that the international way is the only approach to be successful.
Very interesting. Thank you. And such a broad CV in a sense. It's a broad-based business interest. So let's dive in a little bit. And I'd love to understand a little. Clearly, sport is big business. Live events are big business. From an advertiser brand perspective, there are so many platforms now. Where do you think the structural changes are occurring in the world of sport? And what's happening in terms of major trends that we should, whether it's the way that the talent and the elite sports folk are being treated, what's happening in terms of their packages, how that's reflecting on the clubs, etc., and all the so much to unlock in that. But just to get an overall understanding, if you like, of what's happening in the world of business of sport, if you like.
Yeah. As you mentioned it in the right way, today sport is a big business, and for sure, with all these, especially coming out of the football, but also in other sports, what happened in US, for example, now the model of franchises that were very popular just in NBA, NFL, NHL, come to also European American football, but not possible in that way, for example, in football. I guess football is, on the one hand side, very big business with two main issues. On the one hand side, the cost structure in the past is now becoming more and more a problem for a lot of clubs, especially the clubs not being in this, what we call it in Europe, these top 5 leagues with the Premier League on the top, but also Germany, Italy, France, and Spain for sure. But all these mid-size leagues and clubs, and also smaller leagues like the Austrian League, for example, they have a big problem. And when you look at the revenue streams, it's very clear that the main revenue streams for the clubs are, on the one hand side, the TV rights. I guess we can media rights. It's not only TV, it's media rights. Then you have for example, the transfer market. For sure, you have the buyers like the Premier League, but especially the smaller leagues. Then you have the sponsorships, but because of economic development worldwide, it's getting more and more, on the one hand side, difficult for smaller leagues to get the big sponsors. And look, for example, in Premier League, I guess you have more than 80% of the investors or the sponsors are from the international side, not only as former the US, but especially the Arabic Middle East, but now less China. So you see the market, and now India is rising up. So the market is developing on the international way.
Yeah.
And the problem is for the smaller leagues as well, that beside the transfer market, in the last years, TV was climbing up. But in the last years, that on the one hand side, the amounts paid by the not TV stations, but also the streaming services are going down. So it's a tight market. So I guess football and sports is becoming less romantic, I say, but more economical, major, and also the structuring. This is also one of my business, that from the former association, the fans meeting on the weekend, supporting their team, becoming a 24/7 worldwide entity, earning money. You have holding models. Think about the City Group, located in London, not in Manchester, located in London, or shareholders or convertibles in financing. So you have a lot of things that you know from the financial business, but to bring down, on the one hand side, the cost structure, and to rise the possibility of predictable revenues is the main challenge for a lot of clubs.
So if I take that to the nth degree, does that mean that ultimately we're going to have really the top 20 clubs in the single division in each of the countries in Europe, for instance, that are doing pretty well and generating significant media rights, sponsorship fees, etc.? But does that equally mean that at the other end of the pole, that a slew of clubs in the second, third, fourth divisions are just going to go out of business? So it becomes almost like an amateur sport, and then there's a big jump into the world of professional sport. Is that a viable route as well?
This is the main tension. Yeah, this is the main tension. You have the problem. You heard about all the plans you had with the Super League, and I just this week one of these very good and detailed reports were published again. I guess it was Deloitte or even from UEFA, showing that I guess the top 20 clubs together earn more money than the next 150 clubs. So this is what you mentioned. And then within this Premier League, I guess within the first top 10 ranked clubs, 6 out of Premier League, and then for sure Paris Saint-Germain, you have Real Barcelona. But the rest it's not only Arsenal or Chelsea or Liverpool or Manchester City, Manchester United. So this is maybe one of the big problems that this concentrate and focus of the big things, but it's also like in the events, everyone wants to become part of Champions League.
Yeah.
And Champions League for sure has to defend themselves against the possible Super League, as the file that happened a couple of years ago. And now you have this quarrel between UEFA and the clubs concerning this Super League, because for sure they want to earn more and more money, and also these international rights. This is one of the secret of the success of the Premier League, this very early international way. And when you see it, for example, I guess TV revenues from the UK market is 1.9 billion, and from the international market it's nearly 3 billion or more than 3 billion only for Premier League. So this is. And when you have all the statistics, as you mentioned, I'm also a lecturer on this International Football Institute based in Ismaning, nearby Munich and Vienna. And I have in all my classes, and then you see all the statistics when they started in the end of the 90s, and now Premier League is on top. Then you have a big gap. Spain and Germany are heading for position 2 and 3. And then there's another gap, and you have Italy and France, and then there's a big gap, and the other clubs follow. For example, competitions like Europa League or Conference League are really only possible because of the money they take from Champions League. This is, I guess, especially in football, but also in other sports as well, one of the big problems.
And then how does that affect the route for talent to get to top levels of sport? Because surely that there was always the path from amateur sport into the lower leagues, and then from there you were picked out and put into the academies of the big clubs. But how does that work now if you've now got a scenario where you're not able to have a relatively steady route to the top?
Yeah, I guess it's a combination. You're really hunting for the big talents, and you often read boys from 13 or 14. On the one hand, you have to take care of the FIFA rules. They try, so worldwide football rules, also the same in football. NFL has a very clear pathway program, bringing talented players from Africa or from Europe to the NFL. But in football, it's often a problem. And this is, I guess, this combination of these multi-club ownership programs, like you have on the one hand side Citigroup, but for example, very popular also the Red Bull Group.
Yeah.
When they started, they have their own academies, then they can bring the talented players, and then when the talented players developed, often with a second club, either in the local market or even in Europe, then they can climb up from club to club to become one of the big stars, maybe in a big club. But and therefore investments also, during my time, we had a program called STAR program. It was the biggest infrastructure investment program we had. We renewed and enlarged our stadium, but for sure, we also wanted to enlarge the academy. And bringing young players from the academy then to international market. For example, in my own old club, Austria Wien, they are now very happy because one of the talented players, they also took part at the under-17 World Championship. They were runner-up in the final. And one of these players with international background, it's called Ndokwe. So his, I guess, mother was from Nigeria and his father was from Serbia, but he was Austrian citizen, and he will go to Liverpool. Let's hope he will play with LFC. But I guess this vote for talents, this hunt for talents is very important. But you never have to forget, you see only the top stars. When guys like Dirks, when they go to LFC, or the players, But there are so many other players that will not succeed, and for them it's so important to play. Therefore, develop as your own club a system from the academy, often with your farm team, up to the first team, and then go to a big league. And this is maybe one of the success stories when you see also the City Group and this Girona, where the brother of Pep Guardiola works. All these ideas, I guess, go in this direction.
Yeah, no, I get that. I guess my point is very much around the idea that if you're a huge talent, a young amateur talent, let's call it in 5-10 years' time, when a lot of this middle market is not there potentially, that it's not just about being a talent, it's being able to perform at the very highest level under huge scrutiny from the world. And that's a major step. And so that middle world of the lower leagues allowed these very talented, raw talented players to be able to practice, if you like, their trade before being lifted up to this massive world stage.
And don't forget, especially when you talk about young pupils or young, today you have to talk about not only boys, but girls.
Yes,
very
absolutely.
Academies, only women's football, but also in other sports. But it's so important that this is one of the things we integrated. We founded the first Viennese football high school or college, where we opened from high school before they go to university, that for the players that want to become professional, normally it's in Austria 4 years, and we founded a possibility that they will have 5 years, so that can take part on the one hand side on all these tournaments, international games, national teams they play, but have their education, because it's so important that they get their final exam, because if they will not succeed in sports, then they can do other things and often become teachers, coaches, things like this.
For sure.
This is also a responsibility that clubs had today, and also this was FIFA, because this was in earlier times, they brought especially young talented players from Africa with 12, 13, especially to Italy.
Yeah.
And if they do not suit with 16, okay, go away. And then they were lost. What should they do? I have no parents here. I have no family here. Yes. So this is a big responsibility you have also. But this hunt for talent is, on the one hand side, amazing infrastructure, a lot of investments there. But don't forget, these young boys and girls develop also their own personality. And this is often the main problem for this, that you lose so many of the talented players because they cannot handle it as a person. This is also a problem.
Absolutely. Let's change tack a little bit and talk around content. Now, sort of historically, whether it's football or any other sport, the club or the organization behind that sport has felt, you know what, our job is to deliver and host an event. We'll put out a live match or whatever it might be, and that's our job done. Whatever our audience do, that's fine. We're getting paid by the big organization for media rights, and we're done. But now it's clear that with all the various social media and streaming platforms, that content is changing. So it's not just about the live event. It's about fan content, fan-generated content. It's about, you see the success of Formula One when the series went out on Netflix. It's all of those things, and it's also player content as well on Instagram and social media, etc. So how are organizations taking all of that on and being able to both monetize but also deal with it in terms of the amount of content?
You are completely right. This changed completely. There was a big change in the last 15 years. As you mentioned before, one of the main advantages of sport is still it's a live event. So this is often in comparison to other cinema or theater, for sure it's live and people and with all these betting rights and things like this. But the expectation of the fan community changed completely. In former times it was ticket, okay, sell your ticket, you have your seat, then you open the gates 1.5 hours before kickoff, buy either a beer or a soft drink and then something to eat, sit down, watch the game, and then go home. Never. It's entertainment. You are, as you mentioned, in a competition. How will people spend their money? So you see that the stadiums are modern event areas. For sure, you have to have Wi-Fi. You have to have areas. Look what happened with NFL when they celebrate the game all day long, like tailgating and things like this. But and especially also the combination of broadcasting. On the one hand side, you should have free TV to reach the people, but on the one hand side, you need all the streaming platforms to monetize it, and to personalize it, because the expectation of the especially younger generation is that I want my personal content shorter. As we mentioned before, you need reels, you need background stories, and this changed also the world within the clubs completely. Just give you a short example. As I mentioned before, we had partnership with Bayern Munich. Bayern Munich was very famous for their training camp within Sebener Straße, where you had there was the fields and the main house where also the administration was, and there was the former youth department where for the young players where Schweinsteiger was, where Alaba was. And when I visited, I guess 5 years ago, Bayern Munich, there was big constructions, what's going on here, because I know that they built a new academy youth area outside the city, nearby the new stadium. We changed and we reconstructed, will be our media center, where we have Bayern Munich TV. So you have their own club TV, where they produce all day long. They bring in former famous editors, journalists within the club TV. Or when we played international, even I guess 8-9 years ago, AS Roma had 60, 70 people in their TV, where we had 3 people in the press department. So you see what happened, producing the content, and also what happens now. We had discussions in Austria that leagues like what you have now in France, for example, because they are not satisfied with TV contracts, even its platform and free TV, they produce their own platforms. So coming these league TV platforms and monetizing here the subscriptions and things like this is going one of the most important revenue streams for the clubs. And the combination of all of this, free TV to have reach the people, even because then you have this. Now you have different numbers. I guess even in a small market like Austria, you need at the moment 4 or 5 different streaming subscriptions when you want to cover all the games, because one has league, one has national cup, the other one has UEFA Cup, the other one has Champions League, but also Champions League is divided. I can watch the one team here and this. So this is really, it's also expensive, and there you have to be careful that people are still able to spend their money, because then it's again emotion, and this combination of emotion and monetizing, and also all the data you have now, also for the clubs important. It's like we said, data is the new oil, the new revenue stream for the clubs, but clubs are often not able to handle it, and therefore with all this AI now coming up and things like this, so it's a really big change, and it's not the game or the training, the 24/7 worldwide entertainment media entity doing sports, to describe it.
So to put all that together, if I ask you, what do you think the world of sport, and potentially if you want to concentrate on football or any other, but what does the world of sport look like in 10 years' time, when we have digitization on a much more granular basis in terms of customized services, AI clearly playing a huge role, whether the individual talent becomes more powerful almost than the club itself? Where do you see the trends going to, and where does sport look like if we turned up again in 10 years' time?
I guess it's a very interesting bridge that the clubs have to pass to be relevant, to stay relevant also in 10 years. Because especially in football, on the one hand side, tradition remains very important. Think about the legacy of the clubs, and like museums, the old stars, but it's not enough. You have to adapt. You have to have new formats. You have to think about kickoff times because of international TV rights. You create new competitions, maybe new league, new kinds. Think about all these Kings League and Icon League. So even in football, you don't have the traditional leagues and national cups and international. Also new competitions begin. Also the worldwide coverage, like you have now the US market coming more and more also from the investor side, but markets like 10 years ago, the Middle East, but now stars going to Saudi, they're developing their own league. We had Qatar hosted the World Cup. Saudi Arabia will host the World Cup, I guess, in 2034. So there is a big and huge change that the clubs have to adapt. All this concerning media, international players, handling AI, going with international partners, even sponsorships changed completely. But it was in former time, okay, bring my logo, my photo on your T-shirt, on your boards, maybe in the stadium. No longer that way. It's working together, developing the brand, giving a brand experience. Insurance company has completely other interests than a nutrition company, things like this. And creating, and also, for example, also the expectation of the fan. I often say, don't say fan, because you have so many groups within the fans. You have on the one hand side sponsors. Take the young, for example, young people. For them, life is not but having an event, or even if their players are influencers or things like this, bringing them, this is what we want to watch. So it really changed completely. And it's not only in football, it's in all the other. You have to adapt if you want to be part of the story.
Absolutely. I'm conscious of timing, and I really want to understand a little bit more about your business, what you're doing today. I'm also quite keen to hear about how a lot of our viewers and listeners are investors, are family officers, and ultra high net worth individuals. So what are the investment opportunities that potentially lie in front of some of these investors? We've talked in the past about transfer markets and pre-financing of those transfer markets, etc. So talk to us a little bit about the opportunities for investment, and also about what your business is today.
So it's very interesting, because when you look at the historical development, you will see that for especially the football industry, within the last 20 years, they always went up. You had, for sure, like also with Corona, but when you take the average, they are very successful. And clubs are searching money all the time. And therefore, special and different needs developed. And for example, giving you this transfer program, people often read in the newspapers, okay, Haaland went from Borussia Dortmund to Manchester City. Oh, it's 60 million, 70 million euros. Then how is it structured? This is then important. You pay in different installments. I've learned from my friends from Borussia Dortmund that the first installment was paid by Manchester City, I guess 12 months after signing.
Okay.
But for sure, they have to reinvest. And then you have sell-on fees. When, for example, a young player is then sold to the next big club. Think about a player like Mane or Van Dijk. First he goes to Southampton, and then he goes to Liverpool. Then you have sell-on fees. You might have success fees, for example, when they become champion or things like this. And structuring all these and supporting even smaller clubs with this, also with solidarity payments. This is one of my jobs. And even today, the discussion, very interesting, because more and more international investors, or for example, with also people from Switzerland, from Liechtenstein, they want to release maybe a fund that, because you have very interesting interest rates on the one hand side, and it's secured because of the rules that are now published by FIFA and UEFA. Because if you have payments overdue against other clubs or the players, you will be sent off international competitions, and therefore the brand value will, and so they try to avoid this. And therefore, one of my partners did it for more than 10 years, nearly 1 billion of this transfer financing, and no, I guess 0% money failed.
Borussia isn't going to default, right? So
the risk is very The next thing is also this infrastructure in shares, but then you have special rules, for example, like in Austria and Germany with the 50+1. So the association has to be the main shareholder because of tax reasons. So in different markets, but for sure infrastructure, convertibles, things like this. The good thing is, I guess, the margin and the interest rate and the return on investment, and on the one hand side, the risk there for higher yields is a very interesting way. And therefore, I guess, is the reason why more and more family offices, banks, or support investments in the sports industry, because it's one of the industries that within this average development in the last years, and because of the live event, and because of that, what sports is also necessary in today's whole world, even geopolitical things, as I mentioned before, Saudi Arabia will host, for example, the World Cup. So these are interesting, and this is what I do with my own business, with my partners in other businesses, that we try to advise them. And for sure, you have, let's see, as I mentioned before, my work for the Kenston group. Because of sports, I came together with them. Now we're talking, and often you have that companies or persons, like I mentioned before, the CEO of the club or the president of the club has its own business, he has a problem. So sticking together this network of sport with your normal business is one of the interesting things. And especially, for example, when I hear the UAE, then they say, oh, Mr. Kraetschmer, you wear sport. Can you come talk to these guys? And so sports brings you the basis, and then you can develop business with the guys. So sports itself is a business market, but sports is a perfect platform to go also in other sports. And don't forget, not only football, golf, very popular, tennis worldwide, American football, and with all what's happening in India, it's really crazy. But you have to be open-minded. Yeah. It's a worldwide thing. You see what's happening, just for the end, maybe NFL, NBA, very clear product that they see, okay, we covered really the market in the US, nearly 95, 98%. We have to enter into new markets, and they have very clear strategy, which franchise should go in which market in Europe, but all these international games, London games, Madrid game, Paris game, games in Munich, for their normal league. So they are really on a very interesting way.
Fantastic. Markus, that's been a wonderful trip and journey through this world. Fascinating. As I say, it's both a passion and a business. Really appreciate your time, and hope to see you again soon.